All right, Kiss Army, welcome to the KissFAQ podcast. Thank you for giving us your time today and letting us into your head. I hope we don't do any damage. We're just a bunch of Kiss fans and we talk Kiss. So come along for the ride. You've got nothing to lose. All right, welcome to the KissFAQ podcast. It's that time of week where we get to hang out with friends and talk about Kiss. I like that. After having a shitty week in the office, it's always good just to relax and get to monologue, get to pontificate, and get to do all sorts of things. I want to thank everyone who's joining us live. Ian Conahan, Austin Newlands, KissVids, G. Chupko, Max, Stargazer. Jeff Davidson was first out of the gate, 17 minutes early. Sir, you are a gold-winning star today. All right, we got Marcus Almighty, we got St. Louis Kiss, we got Voice of Reason, Ken, for today's show. We're going to be talking about whether 1986 was a wasted year or not. But first, we got to get through the stuff we always do at the top of the show, and that is news. There's none this week, to be perfectly honest. I tried to publish a book, but I had technical issues. Damn it.
Really?
Damn it. Yeah, still having technical issues as well. I had to order new proof copies to see if the technical issues had translated into paper. But so something is coming and it'll be out when it's out.
Cool.
Since I've been pontificating, we've had Diegus Inc. in South Carolina, I guess, and Bucky YZ and 19 Gunter 71 joining. So as for the news this week, Kiss Online put out an email blast, and it was what A songs must be picked to be performed at the whatever the event's called in Las Vegas in November. I've got one vote for that, and then I'll go around the table and ask everyone. I think the only fitting song that has to be performed during that event is Parasite. Ken, what say you?
Yeah, that's a good one. They're all good. All the Ace songs are great. I don't know. Parasite is good. Strange Ways. I'm thinking also, what is it? Rocket Ride. Even though Gene has been performing it, so it should be easier for him to, play on that one. So I'll say Rocket Ride as another one.
Oh yeah, so now you figured out why Gene's doing it. He's been practicing Rocket Ride.
Yeah, he knew he had to do it way ahead of time, so it's
live rehearsal.
That complex bass line. I hope he doesn't forget the lyrics. Oh wait, he doesn't sing it. Lonnie, what song would you be voting for as a mandatory must-have?
I think a mandatory must-have. It's an easy pick. It's Cold Gin. How can you not do Cold Gin for Ace for it? 100%.
Absolutely. Marco, good to see you out there in the ozone. That's a great pick, ozone, by the way. All right, Mark, you get to go last. So what's it going to be?
I honestly think the song that I would love to hear is Strange Ways. I mean, it's such a strong song. I mean, it always gets a great reaction, and it's really a song that was neglected throughout the original 4 years as far as being played live. So you can never get enough of it now. So I would vote for that.
All right, let's go into the mail room. Did anyone get any mail this week? Kiss related stuff or not? Ken, what did you buy this week, Ken? Kiss related. You must have bought something.
Ken.
It's been a few days.
I did not.
Wow.
Did I buy anything Kiss stuff? I don't think so. No Kiss stuff this week.
I'm pretty surprised.
Shame on you.
Yeah.
Hand in your Kiss Army medallion right now because you're clearly not
cave?
worthy.
You didn't cave and get that Walmart greatest hits? Come on, Ken. Something.
No, I haven't gotten that one. That's
He will surrender to the power of Gene. He will feel the need to open his wallet and start throwing money at shiny Kiss logos. Mark, what about you? You get anything this week?
No, much. I know that everybody out there was hoping that it would be 2 for 2, but no. Last week was the first time in a long time, and until I get the Anaheim, then it'll be that for now.
Yeah, last week was an outlier for Marcus Almighty.
Yes.
All right, Lonnie, what about you? Are we going to be a complete loss today?
I think we are. I don't think I got anything this week. No, we're boring this week as far as what came in the mail.
No, we're not. I bought shit. I got.
Oh, there you go. Julian doesn't
Oh.
note this down.
I got young guitar. I can't even get it to display right, but there you go. From which one is this? April 97, and it's got a really cool feature in here. I mean, I've already got PDF scans of this stuff, but it's got a very cool feature on Ace's and Paul's rigs.
Nice.
And on the reunion tour. So they went behind the scenes to take pictures of the guitars. They missed one for Ace, but they also looked at the amps, some of the FX, and stuff that went into making reunion era Kiss sound like they sounded. So very interesting. I just wanted to be able to do super high scans of that stuff to translate it with better quality from Japanese. I also got another one in from Japan. Issue of Burn.
Oh, nice.
Burn.
They like the minstrel himself, Richie Blackmore. I bought this for a single page because it's got an ad in it for the remasters from April 97. So it was the second batch of remasters, the ones in jewel cases, along with the solo albums that were going to be released on that, not the slip cover ones with the shuffle pack box that came out in January in conjunction with the tour. And you can guess why I needed both of those from that project that I'm working on. So let's see. Sounds good, Marco. Look forward to that next installment of the Destroyer magazine. Still, I'd say I call it the official voice of the Kiss Army because we are fans, and that is the best magazine out there. What else? All right, so let's get into today's topic. This was 1986. A wasted year. This was, for me anyway, I had only been a fan for a few months, the first time that Kiss had not released an album during their career. They took 1986 off, in essence, after coming off the road in April 1986, finishing up the Asylum tour, and then essentially disappeared. Or not, because they didn't really disappear. But there was going to be quite a delay. The party line at the time was that Kiss were taking time off to craft the ultimate Kiss album. Ultimate. Interesting play on words. Paul and Gene had discussed the future of Kiss and asked themselves, are we being the very best Kiss? Gene basically said that there were new areas to explore, new standards to attain. And Paul, of course, had wanted to work with a particular producer going back to 1978 and take time off to craft the songs. Now, was that reality? For those of us who were fans in 86, what was your perception at the time about Kiss coming off the road and there not being an album in September, October for the first time in quite a long time? Mark?
Well, back in the younger days, I don't think I really had that big an alarm go off, like, oh no, there was no Kiss album and stuff like that, because I was enjoying the records that I had, and I was hanging out with friends and so on and so forth. But later on, obviously, when you start getting into Kiss more diligently and looking into their whole background and stuff like that, and it is a sort of odd thing to see, because it was almost coming like for proper clockwork, and for good reasons, because every time you put out a record, you get an advance from the record label, and at this point Kiss desperately needed money, so for them to take a chance and take a year off, they majorly rolled the dice, and I'll get into that later. But yeah, I wasn't so surprised at the time when I was young, like at 86 proper. So
Jesus, we're at that age where Mark and all of us are saying when I was young. Lonnie?
40 years ago.
Well,
when you were 4 years old.
Yeah, that's gonna be a little issue with me today, is that I was about 6 years old in 1986, and I don't remember Kiss taking the year off in 1986. I was probably following other things a little more closely, or just didn't have many cares.
Sitting in a puddle of mud, playing with your G.I. Joes or whatever.
G.I. Joe action figures.
Yeah, not a whole lot of cares at the time. So.
All right, Ken, what about you? 1986, Kiss takes the year off. What were you doing? How did you take it?
Well, I did see them. Had to be earlier in that year in concert. So, and that must have been a Wasp opening, I think. Anyway, yeah. I mean, the weird thing is, I heard they were taking some more time, and I thought, oh, this is, what for, or what are they doing? Because you were used to getting an album every year, a new album. It happened like clockwork, almost at the same time every year in the fall or whatever, most of the time. So I was used to something coming out, but I thought, okay, well, if they're going to craft, they're working hard on a new album, make it really, really good.
Optimistic even back then.
We were hoping. What we got is not quite that, but yeah, I mean, there was a lot of other music, and we'll get into that, that I was into, and I was seeing other concerts and other stuff to fill my time. But yeah, it was kind of weird where Kiss didn't have an album for quite a while, from the Asylum to Crazy Nights in that period of time. So yeah, it's kind of a weird thing. Something was off there. So it didn't bother me too much. Like I said, I was listening to a whole bunch of other stuff too.
Yeah, so as a new fan for me, it was a very weird time because I believe it was the Accept No Limitations ad had been out for the Asylum album and had listed all the catalog dates. So it looked like there was a lot of activity for Kiss when September comes around every year. So it almost seemed like September 86. I was like, oh, cool. I'm going to be getting a new Kiss album. This is going to be my first new Kiss album. I can't wait. It's going to continue in the vein of Creatures, Look It Up, Animalize, Asylum. I'm like, I can't wait. This is so cool. There's so much good music and hard rock going on. I was excited, and then there was nothing, and you'd see little bits and pieces, that they were going to be waiting. So it was a bit of a bummer. I mean, Creatures of the Night tour ends April the 3rd, 1983, and you get Lick It Up released in September of that year. Tour starts October the 11th. Lick It Up ended March the 17th, and next album comes out mid-September 1984, and they're on tour immediately. Animalized tour ends late March 1985, and then you get Asylum in mid-September, and then things start to fall apart, and that's why I think we end up with this delay, because they didn't get out on the road until the end of November 1985, courtesy of Gene. So it was an interesting time because there was a lot of other things going on in the interim. So I was bummed. I was very bummed because it was like September is when you're supposed to be giving me a new Kiss album. I'm a new guy here. I need to be, kept happy and placated. Daniel, what about you?
Well, I recall becoming a fan in '85, so I was also awaiting the new album. However, I started reading that Kiss magazine that was very big in Sweden called OK magazine. It wasn't really a Kiss magazine, it was a musical magazine, but Kiss was always, or a lot of times, on the front cover, great articles in it. So I started reading that, and then I started buying albums I didn't have. So I remember getting Kiss Killers pretty early, and Dressed to Kill was one of the early ones, and Creatures of the Night. And I just started listening to those albums. So for me, it didn't seem that long before the next album came out, because I had all this music and all these great articles to start building my fandom around. So, but I recall being disappointed listening to the next Kiss album. I do recall that.
Excuse me. So what is your perception of what they were doing during that time? Did you were buying magazines? You were probably tuned into music television of some description, MTV for me at least. Looking back now, the contract specified that they had 13 months between delivering one album and delivering the next one, or the label would release a best of some description. So they were going to blow past that with September means October 86. Polygram would have been allowed to release an album, but they were contractually bound to deliver a fresh album 8 months, not less than 8 months, but not more, no later than 11 months after the delivery of the previous album. So they should have had something out in the summer of 86. So they probably had to work with Polygram to, get permission in writing to be delayed, and or their 1983 contract renegotiation had changed things. But what was your perception of that period, that black hole, Ken?
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't
it's
know.
40 years ago. What the hell were you thinking on this stage?
Yeah.
I mean,
in 1986?
I
Come
don't
on.
know.
How
Yeah.
mad were you?
What we know now, though, is, Paul wanted to wait, right? So I don't know if I knew that back then, that they were waiting for a specific producer. Maybe not. And maybe I did. I can't remember. But I think that was a problem. And the other thing is just, I think, a problem just choosing Nevison as a producer. And we find out later on that it's not the right thing. So that period of time is, we hear rumors about things, about album titles, songs, and all that kind of stuff. But really, nothing much going on. Though I think they were doing the was it Exposed video, or filming it at some point during that time period. So they filled time with that kind of stuff. But yeah, it was just I think the thing is, there was so much good music coming out at that time that it kind of filled that void of Kiss. And going to a bunch of concerts during that time too with other bands also filled that void. I knew they were going to come back at some point. I was just going to have to wait.
Yeah, Mark, what about you?
Well, much like some of the other people here, I mean, I was like 13 around this time. So again, I didn't really follow as intently what was going on during those time periods. But one thing that really helped clear up the void, besides speculation, what were they doing at this time? Maybe they were trying to do a live album instead in the meantime, to kind of, have something in the intern instead of waiting and having nothing done. But one thing that helped, again, clear the gap of my knowledge was this book here, because this goes into great detail about what happened during those times when they were not doing anything. And it said here perfectly, and I'll just, refer to a couple points here. And that's just saying that, they did wait for Nevison. They wanted to do that. Also, it's interesting here to make note that during this time, Paul and Gene came to agreement that there was no longer a 50-50 income sharing thing anymore. Everything would be doing now according to royalties. No more even split between Gene and Paul. So, and on the condition that Gene was able to go do his movies and stuff, and Paul was left in complete control of the stuff that Kiss was going to be doing. And it says here too, that the problem was Ron Nevison was booked for a year. And the really interesting part about this is that it's almost like there was something in the air. Like everybody else that was not involved with Kiss, that was involved with Kiss in the past, almost it's like they knew that they were sitting ducks in the water waiting, because they said that people started coming in and asking for money. Peter Criss came in and asked for back payments of stuff all of a sudden, for stuff that he was owed. And they said there was a lot of money situations that really screwed things up. Then they decided to test the waters and then not use Winterland as their, merchandise thing. And that led into problems because they were looking for money. They needed money during this time period. So there was a lot going on in the background that none of us probably knew about because it was all business related. So it's very interesting. If you don't have this book, I highly recommend getting it because it does go into great detail about that. And then that's the line right here, just says, "Kiss was running out of money." you know.
Mhm.
So they needed to do something in the intern, and some of it really screwed up. And one of the funniest thing was that they knew they were in trouble early. Is when Paul came back from their tour, he came home and he couldn't turn. He tried to turn his lights on, nothing happened. They shut off his power because he was behind in payments for his electrical bills. So, you know, that's got to tell you something.
Daniel.
Well, I tried to post a link in the comments, but it failed. I posted it in the private chat, but there's a link. It didn't work. There's a link there to OK Magazine 1986.
Oh,
and it's all the numbers, and you can read through them if you want to. That was my Kiss fandom back then. I started reading that magazine, and if you look through those magazines, there's a lot of Kiss stickers with non-makeup Kiss and makeup Kiss. So I was able to see the history of the band as well. There were articles with, for example, Bruce Kulick, 2 pages about Bruce and who he was and so forth. Posters, great posters from the Dynasty era all the way up to the Asylum era. So I got a lot of Kiss news, and I don't know how many magazines they released. Hold on, I'll just check. They came 26 magazines came out every year. So you got a lot of information. I started reading about other bands, but somehow I stayed with Kiss and continued my Kiss fandom.
Yeah, 86 was the year of my education through magazines. I mean, I did the same thing, except I was going into used record stores, Johnson City, New York, the purple secondhand store. I don't even remember its name. I just remember it was painted purple. But they had stacks of Hit Paraders and Circus and other magazines, and Cream. And I would look for Kiss content in those and just hang out in there, you know, going through the racks. So that to me was kind of how I bridged the gap. My perception of the gap itself was I wasn't so much aware of it, other than the expectation that there should have been a Kiss album. But other than that, I wasn't a subscriber to any magazines. I wasn't getting any current news. Who did I miss? Ken?
No, you got me.
I'm not even
Lonnie, I think.
Lonnie,
Lonnie.
I mean, if you have anything to say about what you missed.
Do you have anything?
Yeah, what'd you miss?
Well, one interesting point I'm going to say, you guys are talking about Kiss needing money. You know, well, why wouldn't they say, hey, you know what, just go ahead and release a greatest hits. Maybe we can get some kind of revenue coming in from that instead of, you know, if we're going to wait another year to put out an album. Why do you, Julian, why do you think they didn't say, yeah, just go ahead and put out a greatest hits?
I don't know why they wouldn't have been amenable to, I think someone mentioned as well in the chat, a Live 3. Some product to bridge that gap. I mean, I know they were working on and planning for that, you know, the Kiss Exposed. I don't know when that becomes public knowledge, but I think in terms of everything, getting Paul and Gene on the same page, let's be absolutely clear. And I've had to do a lot of notes today for this episode, and I want to use some of them. They come off the road in April '86, and the next week, Gene's on location filming. There was basically no break for him after the tour. He was filming. Let's see if I get this right. Where the hell is it? You know, he was doing Never Too Young to Die, Trick and Treat, Wanted Dead or Alive. He was producing Easy-O. He's producing Black and Blue.
Jeez.
Where would he have had time, you know, other than turning it over to Paul to deal with everything? And Paul was already dealing with everything. That's part of the friction in this period leading into Crazy Nights, is that Paul is carrying all the load while Gene's off la-di-daing, trying to get his foot in the door in Hollywood or as a mogul with his assembly line of mediocrity. Because you look at any of those properties that I've just described, Gene wasn't exactly hitting home runs with any of those acts or products. Now, you can only succeed by trying, and you're guaranteed to fail more than you succeed. Daniel?
Well, just flickering through these OK magazines, I can see that in number 14, OK 1986, they already it was already known that Kiss wouldn't release an album and that they would hire a producer. The first one since Lick It Up, it says here. And also it mentions Gene Simmons doing a lot of movie parts. So this was known in the I don't know when this came out, June, July, somewhere around there. And what else here? Well, they talk about in Trick or Treat, Gene plays, and there's quite a lot about that movie. And Never Too Young to Die is mentioned. So what should they have done? I think they should have released a live record. I think they should have, they could have done the lazy thing and released Detroit 85. That they play there early 85, that what became Animalized Live Uncensored, or something from the Asylum tour. We just recently got that soundboard. Why not do something with those kinds of recordings? It's just touch it up a little and release it. I think that could have sold quite a bit.
Ken?
Yeah, didn't you get to me? What was the question?
I think the question is about that assembly line of mediocrity. Was any of it worth it to put Kiss on ice for a year, in essence? And then I'm going to ask all your favorites for that mediocre crap of Gene's, especially you, Ken.
Well, I mean, the thing is, I think since Gene was doing all this other stuff, Paul kind of had the upper hand, at least on the Kiss side of things. I think probably since that period of time all the way to the end, he had the control because Gene was doing so many other things with the movies and producing and so on. So I think Gene had no say in how long to wait. And I do know, though, Gene verbally has stated many times, at least, that was not the musical direction he wanted to go. So waiting for that for Neverson to change their sound and follow a trend kind of thing, I don't think he agreed with. So, but he was willing to wait because he had so many things on his plate. Paul had the upper hand then on all that. So,
Mark.
So we're asking about whether all that stuff Gene did was worth the wait. I would say probably not. I mean, a lot of those movies were really bad. I mean, even the best one out of them.
Whoa!
Like Runaway, which is probably the best one out of that. Even that was kind of,
didn't like Never Too Young to Die.
Oh God, those were terrible. Really, those are like, I mean, what did they get? Like a 1 out of 5 star or something? Like, it's just terrible stuff, like unbelievable. And the fact that Gene, would attach himself to it all, maybe he would go for anything at that time because he wanted to get in somehow, right? So that didn't help. But you would think, though, during this time that their management would come in and try to maybe steer the boat a bit and tell them, you know what, guys, this is not a good idea. What are you doing here? Like, this is a waste of time. But the problem is, and thanks to this book, Howard Marks was having his own trouble and was focused on everything else besides Kiss. He was trying to sign all kinds of acts. He was trying to get, according to this, he was trying to get Ted Nugent on. He was trying to get, he was trying to renegotiate or negotiate with what's her name there? What's Gene's woman? No, Gene's woman there. The Diana Ross. Diana Ross.
Oh, Diana Ross.
Right, to get in on there. And they said too here that he was still spending like crazy. And even though they weren't making nearly as much of the money, and apparently Carl had to sit down with them and say, "Hey, listen, man, you're spending like it's the 70s, and we have nowhere near the money here for that." So that was also a time that was dangerous too, because they didn't have proper management steering them. And a lot of the times when I read books, and I'm sure you guys have read books too, where you'll read stories of the management coming in and saying, "Listen, let's not go this way. Let's do this instead," and prevent disaster sometimes. Yeah, sure. Sometimes it may lead to disaster, but a lot of the times the manager's job is to help you better your career. And man, Marx was not doing his stuff at this time. That's for damn sure.
Well, those are any business managers, because Kiss was unmanageable. Don't forget that credit on their albums back then. Lonnie, the assembly line of mediocrity.
Is it worth it? No, it wasn't worth it. But I don't think Gene wanted to do all this stuff. Gene wasn't interested in a new Kiss album at the time. And it was pretty evident. Gene wanted to do other things. He was, very full of himself, thinking he can do whatever he wants to do. He had no interest in a Kiss album in 1986. And just like Julian said, just kind of left Paul with the bag, saying, this is I'm going over here. I'm going to do these other things. And was it worth it? No, but I don't think Gene had no interest in doing a Kiss album, so it was best to wait, because he would have gotten what you would have gotten from Gene would have been very mailed in. If anything.
I think the assembly line of mediocrity is Gene's desperation. Gene desperately wanted to make it, and he saw his personal cachet decreasing out of makeup from Kiss's heyday. So he was willing to do anything. Please, mister, can I be in your movie? In case of one, just, come on. If one got 2 stars, he was on his way. But can you imagine him coming up to Paul Stanley with a great deal of enthusiasm? Paul, check this out. I'm going to be in Never Too Young to Die. And guess what? I'm going to be a transvestite hermaphrodite.
Yeah.
I get to wear Linda Carter's outfit that she did. I was made for. It's going to be awesome. Wait till you see it. Can you imagine being Paul Stanley while he's looking at the financials and seeing the money burn and seeing how they've just torn their asses off and they're not making anything because they've got so many hands in the pie, and they're looking with forward projections down the road, and Paul's strategizing, looking at who's hot, who's up and coming. He sees, Nevison, and he's like, Nevison's already shit-canned working with Night Ranger to work with Hart on their second album, and they managed to get on his schedule after that. Okay, after that, we just have to make it. But instead, he's got to sit down and watch Trick or Treat, Wanted Dead or Alive. I mean, you think that what the hell was that character, Malik Al-Ison or something like that?
Malik Al-Ahim.
Yeah, Paul Stanley probably wanted to shove a hand grenade in Gene's mouth by that point. Stop damaging Kiss's name with this crap that you're working on. It must have been so frustrating for him.
Hell yeah.
But in hindsight, what would you have advised Kiss to do? And you've already talked about a live album. Keep that. A compilation you've talked about. June the 27th, 1986 in Billboard, a little report was, Paul Stanley may be cutting a solo album. Add that into the mix as well, for that matter. Or should Paul Stanley have put together a Kiss album with Jean Beauvoir, again filling in for Gene, like no one noticed? Lonnie.
I think I like the idea of a Paul Stanley solo album in '86. I think that would have been very interesting. Gene, you want to go do your thing? Well, I'm going to go do mine. And I think that would have been very interesting. But it might have been, but it might have been bad for the longevity of Kiss if that would have happened. Maybe Paul would have had other thoughts, saying, you know what, maybe this is the direction I want to go. I don't have to deal with all the hands in the pie, as Julian was referring to, and I can just make my own money and not deal with everything else. So I think the Paul Stanley solo album is interesting, but it might have destroyed Kiss at the same time.
Or maybe he was afraid of devaluing Kiss like Gene had been doing. Ken.
Yeah, I mean, the Paul Stanley, if he released something and it became successful at that time, if it really went down well and sold, had hits and it sold well, that probably would have been the end of Kiss, at least until maybe, that I don't know how he would have been able to keep it going by himself, because we've seen, Ace going by himself and Peter by himself. It really doesn't, work. It works for a while, but then you don't really gain that bigger audience. So I think it would have, either way, they still would have come to a reunion later on. But yeah, that was one option. I mean, he didn't do it for whatever reasons. I don't know. But that would have been an option to do. But I think it would have changed the trajectory of Kiss. And if he really wanted to wait for Nevison, then who are you going to produce? I guess he probably would have produced himself if he did a solo album at that time, because he probably thought he could produce better than anyone else anyway.
Yeah, I think, well, I'll come back to that after I get to everyone else. Daniel.
Well, I think the Paul Stanley solo thing would have been cool to have. He did do a lot of stuff, maybe a bit later in '87. Those tapes, those the publishing tapes.
Best Man for You. God
Don't
help
Let
us.
Go.
Oh.
Time Traveler. Also, Jump the Gun was maybe '87. Two Hearts Collide. Come on, it's a great song. No, it might not. But what I'm trying to say is that there was something here with Paul that he wanted to do stuff that maybe didn't fit the Kiss mold, so to speak. He did stuff that wasn't really for Kiss. I mean, people say he was trying to sell this stuff to other artists, but what if he just would have taken that stuff and made his solo album? I think it would have been a pretty cool solo album, more pop than rock maybe, but would have been cool to have. And also I have to include, I think they might have needed a break from each other. They had been touring and making records year in and year out. Maybe they needed a little bit of break, Gene and Paul, from each other. We do know that a few years later, in '94, they had stopped talking to each other. So sometimes you need to take a break in order to charge your batteries and go full steam ahead.
Yeah, but that rerun of Wanted Dead or Alive was the last straw for Paul in '94. He wasn't going to talk to Gene again after seeing it yet again. Mark.
Yeah, it's interesting. You guys were talking about the Paul Stanley solo album idea, and I think that it could have been a good idea if he would have did one thing. Because I'm reading through this book again here, and they were talking about how that year there was a Castle Donington that Bon Jovi was on, right? Mm. And it said here that John invited both Gene and Paul to come up. They were at the hospitality tents for most of the day. Paul snapped up the offer, but Gene was put off by it, saying, "I don't want to look like the bass player for Bon Jovi just standing in the background." So, but Paul ended up going up and doing it to the delight of thousands in the audience, right? Yep. And it says, as a matter of fact, and it said that, so what I'm thinking is if he would have continued to do those kinds of things, like jump up on stage with other various artists that were popular at the time, it would have put eyes on him a bit more, and a solo album might have ended up being something decent if he would have put himself in the eyes of those people, because it's pointed out here very clearly. It said here, Bon Jovi had eclipsed Kiss in success, selling multi-million albums and setting attendance records throughout the world. It was the ironic part was they were both on the same record label, and Paulie Graham had no trouble selling Bon Jovi records by the tens of millions, while they had to sweat it out just to get Kiss to sell 1 million albums. Later on, it became a running joke that Paul would always say whenever an idea came up, "Did Bon Jovi do it?" That was their running guide for 1986. Whenever planning stuff, they checked older videos. They studied all their, things that they did, what kind of B-sides they did. And it was all based around the fact of if Bon Jovi did it. So again, they became, instead of becoming the leaders like they were in the 70s or the example, they were now copying and following to the letter some of these other acts, specifically Bon Jovi. But if you wanted to do a solo album, I think that approach might have actually helped doing it. Get up on stage with some of these really popular artists, and maybe it would have took those newer younger crowds get more interest in Paul, and maybe it would have worked. Who knows?
That's
Yeah, I'm gonna have to
interesting,
fact check myself because I think he
Mhm.
got up on stage with Motley Crue as well, who were touring
Yeah, yeah.
girls late and
Girls, yeah.
yeah, and then he certainly got up on stage with Poison, who were
Yeah.
at what was it, California Jam the following year. So Daniel, you're gonna say something?
I just wanted to quote an early article from '86 when Paul Stanley is interviewed backstage during the later stages of the Asylum tour, and he says, "Well, I do want to record and release a live album, but I want to do one more studio album, and this new live album, there are only going to be songs from Lick It Up until the next album on it. No old songs, nothing that was on Alive 1 or Alive 2. So they had this kind of in the back of their minds, but it didn't come into fruition.
Mm-hmm.
Lonnie.
What was the question again? I'm sorry.
What was the question?
Well, no, I think we covered it.
Paul Stanley's solo album.
Yeah.
I talked about it.
Okay, thanks.
I think
Yeah, so following on from what Daniel said, by September of '86, Paul Stanley has shelved the idea whether it was ever really a serious one for a solo album. And he said until after the next Kiss studio album, and ultimately he did do it, obviously in '89, the solo tour part of it at least. And then it quickly or rapidly becomes Nevison has, given up working with Night Ranger. He's working with Heart. And then in January, okay, you've mentioned working on Kiss Exposed during this period. And I always kind of consider that to be the stopgap. But there's a couple of things that are going on. Obviously, they did work on filming the stuff. I can't remember the name of the mansion off the top of my head. Gray Hall, I think. Maybe I was probably wrong, but they do. Sonny the Chimp got to hang out with them, and they filmed that. But they were also reissuing the catalog on CD in the U.S. In 87, early '87.
That's right.
That had already happened in Japan in '86, who were slightly ahead technologically than the rest of the world.
What are the plants?
Is Exposed enough in hindsight to have been a bridge? Lonnie, I'll go back to you on that one.
I think it's a decent bridge. Those home videos were very popular at that time. I think it's a decent bridge. There's some good stuff in there from, the Asylum videos, and then the old '70s stuff that they throw out there for the longtime fans. So I think it's a decent bridge to kind of just whet the appetite of the Kiss fan while they're in that break. I got that when I was a teenager and I played the hell out of it. So, when it was current, I'm sure, Kiss fans in '86 ate it up. So it's a decent bridge.
Mark.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it when it first came out. I thought it was, great to have a sort of long form video like that. Of course, the thing that appealed to somebody like me was those old videos that they showed, like, the old performances and stuff like that. I was like, wow, because I rarely got to see something like that up to that point, right? So it was really cool seeing that, and they had their humor that appealed to the teenager, right? That they were doing on there. So I thought it was a decent stopgap for them. But what I'm always curious about, though, is that it shows up as being a good seller, like a platinum sales thing, but clearly it didn't do anything to help them financially. So I'm wondering when it came out time-wise, and was it too late to help, steady the sinking ship? Or, that's always the thing that I was kind of not 100% sure. Maybe Julian's more aware of this, like when it came out, and was it too late to help them financially, or what was the case with that?
Again, the money burn was such. It did very well. It was a $29.99 video product in 1987. So they had been aiming for 25,000. It got that in pre-sales. So it did extraordinarily well. My point on it being a bridge is only what I learned in hindsight. I loved it at the time because I thought it was great, because all of a sudden you had Aerosmith doing videos, you had Motley doing videos, you
Yeah.
had, again, every band was doing videos, and I was into those going back to like the 83 Whitesnake video. So it was very cool. But they put a 3-month promotional plan around Exposed. And I think they blew their wad promotionally, so that by the time Crazy Nights comes around, they'd already been on VJs on MTV. They'd been all over the press for the freaking Exposed video. And, but whatever. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah.
Ken, Exposed, Bridge, Gap.
Yeah, no, it was a good Gap. I remember, I don't know, when was it released, actually?
May 87.
May 87? Yeah, so, yeah, it was finally getting something. You kind of knew they were, at least they did something, and it was great to have the, like, Lonnie was saying, and Mark, the old videos, where the only way you could get those old classic makeup videos were bootlegs out there, if you were lucky enough to find them. And I don't think I had any at that time. I think I started getting some shortly thereafter, or maybe I found one at around that time. But it was kind of a revelation, because none of that stuff was ever released. You would think you would have that would have been out by that time, the classic Kiss concerts and stuff, just that they would have put it out as a product, actually. But we had to wait till the 2000s, really, for the full product, like, Kissology and all that stuff. So, yeah, it was a good stopgap. It seems my video, I kept pausing it on Christine for some reason, but I don't know.
In the jacuzzi?
The jacuzzi, yeah. See, you know that. But yeah, it was cool. I mean, you thought, is this how they really like it? They don't live in this mansion, it's like, come on. It was interesting. It was funny. You did get the not real Kiss, and then you got a little bit of the real Kiss. The best parts also are where they're talking about the early years of Kiss, and Gene and Paul are just sitting there talking about that stuff, the history, seriously. And that's the best. That's what I want to hear, that kind of stuff. When they start doing other stuff about weird stuff, where Gene's on the throne and all that kind of stuff.
Oh god, the girls hunting the hunter heads.
The heads, there he tells us, it's like, what the heck? It's just, that's kind of comical stuff, but whatever, it worked, and it was a good stopgap. I mean, I played that thing over and over, many times. And the best parts were, again, the videos too, all the classic videos, and the videos that were just not released yet. I mean, they were out even for the other albums and stuff. It's finally good to see it. Later on, they did release that, on DVD, one of the DVDs that they have, and where there's an area where you can go to just watch the music videos only in succession, which is cool, because then you don't get the rest of the in between dialogue and stuff. You can just watch it, sit there and watch all those videos, which is pretty cool that they did that on one of the DVDs.
I'll never say a bad word about Kiss Exposed, because it came at the perfect time to solidify my Kiss fandom by introducing me to a whole Kiss that I had never really considered. Getting to see those legendary videos in full color, again, just showed me that there was a whole different band to discover and enjoy, because again, that was my introduction to seeing original Kiss, and holy shit, it changed my perspective. It was the same with Motley, it was the same with Aerosmith, to show me just like they did with their videos for Pontiac. You see that shit and you're like, oh my god. And Motley, seeing the early videos that you didn't get to see on MTV, Livewire,
Yeah.
That solidified it for me as well, for that matter. Daniel, I didn't get to you on that.
I think it was a great bridge to the next album. Pure 80s cheese, of course, but I think they dropped the ball somewhat because they have really tried to present the lineup as a stable one. Eric had been in the band for quite a while, and Bruce Kulick. This was a chance to introduce him or present him to the fans, and they talk about edit them out. They were nowhere to be seen in the video. I think that was a big mistake and a big shift in how Kiss tackled the thing with the two other members. Instead of trying to push them forward and show them to the fans, they kind of made it the Gene and Paul show. And to me, I was kind of perplexed when I watched that, because up until then, I thought it was like a band, all four are equals and that.
Yeah.
But now it became really, really obvious that it was the Paul and Gene show. And I think they could have done a lot with Eric Carr, the humor, the comedy that he gave the fans through the years. They could have used that in the video and made it more exciting. Instead, they were nowhere to be seen. I think that was a big shift and a big problem with this video.
Here's a great comment before I move on to the best of Gene's assembly line of mediocrity. Rodrigo, Kiss wouldn't survive with a solo album that probably would sound like Crazy Nights. However, Crazy Nights was in essence a solo album. Wouldn't it have been better for a lot of that shit, My Way, I'll Fight Hell to Hold You, to come out, A Time Traveler, to have been released as a Paul Stanley solo album, so it didn't pollute Kiss. Just food
Pollute.
for thought.
I like it. That word, pollute.
Again, Crazy
Tell us
Nights
how you
did a lot
really
of
feel.
damage. Well, again, it did a lot of damage to me. All right, assembly line of mediocrity. What is the best of Gene in 86, 87 that hit of all the shit that he was distracted from Kiss by? And again, it's Easy O, the album, Nasty Nasty, Black and Blue. And let's put up a picture of those guys, because it's worth just celebrating them for a minute. Wanted, Dead or Alive, Trick or Treat, and Never Too Young to Die. What is your favorite? Do you have a guilty pleasure or a favorite amongst those, Marcus Almighty?
God, they're all so
Oh, that's tough.
weak. Yeah, I mean, I was gonna go with, but then I realized that it wasn't done in that year. Was what was that girl there? What's her name? Oh fuck, I'm terrible with names
Dora?
lately. No, the girl that from the Plasmatics. What's her name again?
Wendy O.
Wendy O.
Williams.
Williams.
Wendy O. Williams.
Yeah, her record though wasn't done during this time, right? That was done
80.
earlier.
That was earlier.
Yeah,
That was
okay. So that would have been, if it was that year, that would have been my go-to pick. But this stuff, man, this is terrible. It's like trying to pick the best of like rotten fruit, I don't know. I guess I don't know. I would probably just have to go with the Black and Blue. Probably. I mean, it's probably the most listenable out of it. I wasn't really into EZO and all that other stuff, and the movies were just complete write-offs. So I would probably just go with Black and Blue.
Well, it did have a guest appearance by Peter Criss on that album. And this picture, by the way, just made me chuckle, because if you remember your history on the Dress to Kill tour with Rush, they would goof off, and Alex would put on his bag.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, Lonnie, your favorite of the best of Gene in 1986, 87.
Was Runaway in 86, or is that not on the
No,
list?
84.
It was earlier too.
Oh.
See what I mean? You don't got nothing.
It does make it hard. I guess I'll go Black and Blue also, just because that is a lot.
Not a lot to choose.
That is a lot of crap. So I'll go with Black and Blue as well. It is the most listenable out of all that garbage.
Daniel.
Well, to me, 86, the best thing to me is actually from one of his movies. And it's the way he presented this Arab terrorist, Malak al-Rahim. I think it's great in that role. The movie isn't too much to write home about, but I think his performance of that one is classic mean Arab terrorist. I think he works splendidly in that role. I think he does a great job playing that mean character, and I think the character is pretty interesting. However, the film is not too good. But if you just watch Gene's scenes, at least I enjoy them.
All right, Ken. Give us the word. I know it's so hard for you to select from this buffet of Simmons.
It's a buffet. It's a buffet.
Buffet.
I mean, EZO was okay.
You've got
I
to
like this-
upsell it. You're the Gene guy. We're
always
expecting you to.
Yeah, I always liked Gene's production style on record. I thought he always did pretty good by himself, the sound and everything. But otherwise, I think even though the movie's not good, Never Too Young to Die, his performance, I'm just saying, that was probably his best acting performance of all his movies. To what he did on that, just his performance. It's so cheesy and over the top kind of thing performance. That's probably his best, real performance.
What
I mean, then Run Away, that was pretty good. I mean, that was Mean Gene kind of thing. Even when he's grin, that he did, that he would do in makeup in that movie, but that was before that. So yeah, I just think, I don't go back and watch that. I don't even have that on video, but just I remember seeing it in the movie theaters, and I think I saw it later on. It came out on one of the streaming or something. Saw it again, but that was his performance. It's just so over the top. It's kind of good.
Okay.
Thank you, Ace.
It was actually easy for me. It's that Black and Blue album is probably the best. I mean, I did quite enjoy that EZO video, but again, not a whole lot of that album. He splits duties with, what was it, Val Garay or something like that on the EZO production. But Flashback Heart Attack, that was actually a pretty cool video at the time. It hasn't aged particularly well in terms of its production or sonics, but it was still it still stood out at the time. But Black and Blue album easily. All right, if Kiss had, this is the what if Kiss had released an album in late '86 and gone on tour, there was a lot of good music that came out. I'm thinking particularly of two debuts, Tesla and Cinderella, both issued their debut albums, Night Songs and Mechanical Resonance, that year. Who would you have liked Kiss to, let's say they just followed up with a album in a similar vein to Asylum and everything that we've been doing previously? Who would you love to have seen them pair with for a tour for the 86, 87 cycle, pardon me? Mark.
Well, for me, this is a no-brainer for me. I've always loved that Tesla album, Mechanical Renaissance. They're just fantastic. Like the dual guitar playing in that. I mean, Jeff Keith's, very hoarse, raspy voice, and just fantastic stuff. That whole record from beginning to end, I remember playing it to death. I had a cassette player in my car back then, and I must have went through like 2 or 3 cassettes. One of them because my car chewed it, but the other times because just from listening to it constantly. I just love that stuff on there. Modern Day Cowboy, Little Susie, all kinds of stuff on that. That was just so well done. And it was just, it harkened back to a time when the guitars were a little bit more raw than what was going on at the time. And just the singing and the songwriting just really appealed to me at that time. So that would have been a no-brainer. And I would have loved to have seen a tour or a show like that.
Yeah, I got to see Tesla open for David Lee Roth on that tour. I miss him because of a very large breast, but I did get to hear the soundtrack. The soundtrack was quite wonderful, so maybe that's left an impression. Lonnie, who do you like them to have toured with? Had they?
It's Cinderella for me. I think that first album of theirs is really, really good, and Tom Kiefer is so damn talented. I've seen Cinderella a couple times and just walked away really impressed by him. So I think Cinderella would have been, it's a very 80s lineup. It'd be Kiss in 86 and Cinderella. So I'm going to go with that. I think that would have been pretty cool.
Yeah, first, 2, and 4th Cinderella albums are fantastic. Ken.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with Cinderella as one. I would also go with Europe.
Oh,
As
my pick.
All right, Daniel. Yeah, Europe.
They're on my list as well.
Yeah, Europe would have been a good opener for that for Kiss. I really enjoyed them when they first came out and started getting having hits. So I think it was a perfect time would have been a perfect time for them to open for like a group like Kiss.
Daniel.
Well, my pick was Europe as well, but they had just had that hit with the Final Countdown and had 2 or 3 albums under their belt. They tried to tour the US by themselves, but it didn't go over so well. So maybe they could have, joined Kiss on tour and brought in some fans and bring in the numbers to the shows. But if I can't pick them, I would actually pick, Twisted Sister released Come On Out and Play, I think it's called. And they totally failed on their own. I mean, they burned, crashed and burned. So maybe pick them up and give them a second chance as an opening act, because Dee Snider is one of the best frontmen in rock, and they still had a lot of great stuff that they could play live, even though they weren't big enough to do it by themselves. Maybe they could have worked as an opening act.
Yeah, so on my list, I had Europe, but I wouldn't want them touring Final Countdown with Kiss. I would have wanted them touring Wings of Tomorrow with them, which was a little bit rougher rock, and I think better suited to combine with Kiss. So that Final Countdown, fantastic. Great White, Shot in the Dark. Now they hadn't.
Yeah, Great White.
Yeah, they hadn't kind of gotten to the point yet, but I think it's got to be Tesla. For me, again, just the hard rock, I can still hear that performance in my head. It was really good. But Night Songs for Cinderella, again, there was a good comment here.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And I agree with that. They toured with Bon Jovi. Ace opened for them as well, for that matter, for Ellie's Comet. I don't think that one would have worked out, unfortunately, as much as I love that album. So how did you cope with the gap year? What were some of the bands that you were discovering in 1986 or from 1986 in the case of people who were playing in the mud at the time? Daniel, who were some of the acts? Or was it with Vinnie Vincent, Invasion, and White Tiger filling your plate?
Hell no. No way. I still have a problem listening through those albums. But well, going back to what I said previously, I read the K magazine. It was my Bible. And they presented a lot of acts that I didn't know of. But a few of the acts I tried to, get a hold of some cassettes. Back then you copied cassettes from your friends. And I got a hold of, I think it's called Sacred Heart, Dio album. I think it's his 3rd album that came in 86 or something like that, 85. That was one album that I enjoyed on cassettes. And also Helix, actually, a Canadian band.
Oh, nice.
Oh, No Rest for the Wicked.
Give me an R.
Helix was great.
Oh, yeah. That album.
I
have that on. Yeah, I have that on cassettes, and I like that a lot. So there was a lot of that wasn't me, by the way. It was a lot of Dio, and then I, went back to Holy Diver, and what's the next one? It's called that one that came in '84. No, that's later.
Last in Line.
Yeah,
I think it's Last in Line.
Yeah, 84. That was great as well. So I listened to a lot of Dio and Helix. I think those were the and Helix. Twisted Sister, of course.
Crocus.
Stay Hungry, that came in '84, and come on out and play, '85. So those were my albums.
Nice. Lonnie, 86 picks.
I think my brother had discovered Ozzy. I think, it was pretty early on. My brother discovered Ozzy, and then Poison too. I remember getting a cassette tape of a copy of Open Up and Say Ah, and I think we were listening to that a little bit around that time. But my brother got into Ozzy. I don't know if it was in '86, but my brother got into Ozzy when I was pretty young. My brother's a huge Ozzy guy, so we were probably listening to a lot of that around that time. I would guess.
All right, I'm looking forward to Ken's picks for '86.
For just the stops. I mean, I was listening to, Van Halen 5150, because I was a Hagar fan before that, and so I was kind of really interested to hear him being part of Van Halen, and that was a big deal. And I saw them that year on tour, so for that, and what else? Cinderella. We talked about Europe. Metallica was another big thing I was listening to during '86, and Iron Maiden, of course. All that stuff. There's so much out at the time, and Judas Priest. I was really big on Judas Priest at that time. I know it was Turbo came out.
Turbo.
Yeah. You know what? I like that album.
I'm your turbo.
Yeah, but it's good. It has a lot of parental guidance and other stuff on there.
Out in the cold.
There's some.
We don't need no. Oh, come on.
Yeah, it's good.
Terrible stuff.
It's good. No, it's good.
Locked
It's
In.
not terrible.
Horrendous.
good.
I enjoy that album.
Locked In is okay.
Yeah, it's not
Out in
the
the
best
Cold
album,
is
but
good,
it's not. It's not a bad album. It's really good and entertaining.
Was that '86? That was '85.
Yeah, 86, I think.
April of '86.
Yeah.
Wow, good album.
Yeah. So that was some of it. And then what did I see that year? I didn't see a lot of concerts that year. I saw ZZ Top that year at the Cow Palace. I was just looking at my stuff. Billy Joel, even. I like Billy. I'm a Billy Joel fan. I saw John Fogerty that year. So yeah, there was a lot of other stuff that I was listening to. A lot of great stuff.
The resurrection of ZZ Top was kind of mind-blowing there in the mid-'80s from,
Eliminator. That was kind of
Afterburner as well.
The superstardom.
Yep.
Completely different band again.
Yep.
From its earlier incarnation. Okay, Mark. Yeah, who were you? So your '86 go-tos.
I had the big three that I listened to constantly was Eat 'Em and Smile, David Lee Roth. With Steve Vai and Billy Sheehan. Come on. That was like, it's not a long record, number one. So when you go through it, it's like you immediately just flip it over and play it again because it's so amazing. That record, it's just unbelievable. And then, of course, Master of Puppets was really big with me and my clique of friends there. We listened to that all the time. Somewhere in Time, probably my favorite Maiden record. I love that album. Just such a great record from beginning to end. And of course, this is sort of hit and miss with people that I know, but a lot of people that I knew in my circle love this album, Rage for Order, Queensryche. I really love that album. That's so well done. And the only thing that kind of threw people off was their sort of look at that album was like, oof, they kind of looked a little odd with their outfits and that on that, but musically was really, really good. And of course, one of my favorite power metal bands of all time, and a very much an American band, Fate's Warning, Awaken the Guardian. What a great album that is. I was really big into Fate's Warning. I thought when that album Parallels came out, I thought that was one of the greatest power metal albums ever, period. Terry Brown produced it. They did it here in Ontario at Metalworks. What a great album. So there was a lot of good stuff in '86 that came out. There was no shortage of great stuff we could listen to at that time.
No, absolutely not. Yeah. Daniel's got one of my all-time favorite albums, period. Somewhere in Time. I just adore that album. It's very tough to pick because you've got Slippery When Wet. And I'm sorry, I'll make no apologies. I really like that album. It's a solid piece of product. Queensryche, I'm glad you mentioned, because Rage for Order is a fantastic album. We've talked, or you mentioned David Lee Roth. Again, that's who Tesla was opening for, so that's perfect for me for that period. But Ozzy, The Ultimate Sin
Yes,
is another
yes.
one
Yeah.
of the albums that I really, really do like, because it was so outside the box for him in terms of what material was being written for him. And we all know that Jake and Phil Cezanne were on that, and also an incredible drummer, Randy Castillo.
Yes.
So again, very, very solid band, but no shortage of fantastic music in 1986. Plus, I was starting to go backwards and discover catalogs. For everyone out there, listening to this, what were some of your, favorite bands releasing music in 1986 and those releases? And if they toured with Kiss in an 86, 87 tour, fantasy tour, who would you have loved to have them opening up for Kiss? Again, there's a lot to pick from. Always more. I'm going to go listen to Somewhere in Time after this. That's it. I want to go listen. All right. That's it for this week. So chime in with your comments about today's topics and questions wherever you've listened to this, but we do appreciate you listening to us. But for now, from Daniel, from Lonnie, Ken, Mark, and myself, thanks for joining us, and we shall see you next time.
See ya.
Thank you for spending time listening to the KissFAQ podcast today. All sales are final. There are no refunds. If you'd like, look us up on Facebook or come over to the message board and discuss the topics we've broadcast today. Don't forget to hit subscribe wherever you've listened to this show, and a like would very much be appreciated. We hope you'll join us again, but until then, remember, life's a radio. Turn it up to 10.